Um, yeah, on the first session, we talked about behavior and why we have concern and why behavior issues exist. And also, we just wanted to introduce behavior from different individual lenses, and we had a kind of Q&A as well. So we talked about behavior as if when we do behavior, we don't know we are doing behavior. We are not aware of doing behavior. We just live. When we live, we are manifesting behavior. And the way we solve the problem is the way we interact with the environment, the way we try to have maximum mastery over the environment and surrounding environment, and the way we adapt ourselves or feel connectedness is called behavior. So generally, I spoke about some behaviors would be considered inappropriate at some age, whereas at the other age, they are inappropriate. For example, if a very little child cries, no one say, oh, it's inappropriate. But if a kind of adult person cries, maybe there is something that we need to think about. How come? Um, so I have brought lots of examples to clarify this part. And the next slide about last session was about gradually when we grow up, we face lots of limitation or reality. So a real little child who is being loved as is will face an environment or educational setting or classroom or community with lots of limitation in future in which the child is expected to follow the rules, codes, policies, morality, moral values, or that person would be isolated and would not be appreciated or acknowledged as a kind of great community member. So as the child grows up and becomes an adult, he realizes that for continuing to live among other people in society, he is a kind of is understanding this this conditioned attention. So from kind of unconditioned love and attention, there is a shift toward conditioned attention that only if a person's behavior is appropriate, that person would be accepted as a kind of tolerable or appreciable member of society or community. So you also talked about the roots of every behavior, and it was a very, very, very important slide that we mentioned that the root of every behavior is a single purpose of control. So every behavior is manifested or demonstrated by a child or any person or living organism at all is to gain maximum control. So different layers of control exist, like kind of joyfulness, advocacy, communication, practice, and readiness, and mastery, and appraisal, and setting territory. And if you want to know how they are related to control, you can take a look at the first session's video once Tulsi can release it based in case you inquire it. So we also mentioned that in order to change or modify any behavior, the first steps are that we should first detect the benefits of a behavior, and then we should provide the same benefit to maintain the needs, and then prepare a way for a child to get to those benefits by a more appropriate way. So they are the general rule of thumb that I expanded last session. So we also had kind of self-reflection about the word ideal and the word zero behavioral issue and why these words seems kind of unfair or unrealistic that we expect a child to have ideal behavior with zero behavioral issue and why it's not a kind of fair thing. So with these recap, with whatever we said last session. Now we are ready to move to this session, which is about ABC of behavior, working on antecedent, consequences, and also the kind of action plan 1, 2, 3, and some general do and don'ts. For sure, on last session, we are going to move and talk about more detailed topic about behavior modification in more challenging situation or more difficult situation. But right now, we are a little more inclined to talk about practical things. So fasten your seatbelt and get ready. We are going to jump into the next session right away. So we say A, B, C of behavior. So we have A, B, and C. Yeah, really, A, B, and C. But the term B is the initial antecedent is for A, which have antecedent for A, behavior for B, and consequence for C. So it's a kind of, in a systematic way, always humans or scientists or psychologists have tried to simplify uh, a pattern to make a kind of feedback loop to investigate about all aspects of a behavior. So why a behavior happened and what we do in response to that behavior. So as an example, we can say that a child slammed the door. So a child slammed the door. So it's the behavior that we see. Behavior is anything that you can see. Yeah. So the child did so, but the mom made a kind of verbal warning that, oh, you're not allowed to do that. It's impolite, it's disrespectful, it's dangerous, it's not safe. Why did you do that? Okay. So what the mom did in response to the child's behavior is called consequence. Yeah. So the mom cannot predict when the child is going to slam the door, but the mom should show some reaction to that. So that reaction that comes after the behavior is called consequence. But every time that a behavior happens, there is some antecedent beforehand. So for this scenario, maybe we can see that the child slammed the door, but actually the child had intended to just close the door, but the wind was the antecedent. Yeah. So something that changed totally our interpretation about that thing. Yeah. Something that changed our interpretation of that behavior, or there is a kind of antecedent. So ante means before in the kind of Latin word means before, antecedent means happening. So antecedent is whatever which is happening to predispose and make that behavior ready to happen. So maybe in some situations, even the child's behavior is not within the control of the child. The child behavior was closing the door and unwantedly because of the wind, that door slammed. Is it possible that other antecedents are related to the behavior of slamming the door? For sure, lots of them. For example, maybe right before slamming the door, child asked mom to go to the park, and mom ignored, and child got angry and really slammed the door. So that behavior of intentionally slamming the door, okay, has happened Right after the child felt unfairness or injustice, or felt that his mom does not address his needs. No matter if those needs are realistic or those expectations are fair or not, the child needed something and mom rejected addressing it. Then that situation made the child nervous and anxious, and since that child is not very skilled at verbal behavior, since that child is not very skilled at negotiation through verbalization, maybe that child's behavior is slamming the door. So all these things that are happening before the behavior that make the child more inclined to manifest that behavior is called antecedent. So another example is that just imagine that a child is picking nose. So a child is picking nose, and you see that the mom says, no, 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 no. The child picking nose, and the mom says, no, no, no. And the antecedent could be dry nasal mucus. That in fact, when after the last cold that the child have had, that child is suffering from some dryness in the nasal mucus, and then trying to get rid of the debris or stuff in the mouth because of that clogged mouth, clogged nose. So that child is wiggling there, and that child is not aware about that this behavior is inappropriate or something. So just picking the nose, and then that behavior happens. But the antecedent of the behavior is dried nasal mucus. But are there any other antecedent potentially existing for that picking nose behavior? Yes, for sure. Just just imagine, just imagine that a child um, wants to seek his daddy's attention. Recently, the child has realized that every time that he has put his finger in nose, daddy skip reading the newspaper, put the newspaper away, and just take a look at the child and say, no, no, no. So the child feels that a great way of communication with dad when he is not paying attention to him is to picking nose to seek immediate attention from that. So that antecedent is that the child, the daddy, is reading the newspaper and is not paying attention to the child, and there is a need of attention-seeking behavior from the child. So those things together sum up, and then that picking nose behavior happens with the intention of attention-seeking behavior. Yeah. So another example is about drawing a beautiful picture. Why should we always bring about kind of bad examples? So drawing a beautiful picture that the child does, and then the mom says, "Good, wow!" And just imagine that the antecedent was that the mom was on the phone. Oh, so at this scenario, the mom is on the phone and not paying attention to the child. But since the child is very mature and grown up, based on the past experiences that she has had, and based on the past memories that she realized every time that she has shown some artwork to mom, mom paid immediate attention to her. That child decided to seek attention from mom by drawing a beautiful picture. And even though mom was on the phone, still the mom showed consistent behavior of good consequence, like good, wow. Okay, so that antecedent that mom was ignoring or kind of busy with something else, but that good memory of the child, that the child has some positive memory that if I want to seek attention, I can do some appropriate behavior and that to some good appropriate behavior. So there is not a kind of formula that a kind of bad antecedent necessarily leads to bad behavior. Or there's not a kind of formula to predict that a bad behavior necessarily will be accompanied by a good or bad or appropriate consequences. So it's a kind of easy in the beginning or simple in the beginning, but once you dive into it, you see that, whoa, there are lots of if and do and don't and when and many other factors. Another example of that behavior antecedent consequences, kind of just imagine a child who is pulling a kid's hair. And the kid whose hair was pulled, after that huge load of pain, decided to hand the toy to the child. Just imagine that two children are playing and there is only one favorite toy. And remember, there is a matter of limitation in real world. So if they had two identical toys, they wouldn't fight over that. Or maybe at that situation, the child would decide to have both dolls for herself. But based on the reality and limitations existing in reality, the child faced this fact that, oh, I want to play a toy. Oh, I don't have the toy. That child is not giving the toy to me. So maybe if I pull the hair of the child, I can get to what I want. So I pulled the hair of a child. Yeah, I did it. And the child gave the toy back to me as a consequence of that behavior. And the antecedent was that the kid in the beginning didn't share a toy with him. So that behavior is not appropriate. But with that inappropriate behavior, the child has got to what he wants, has gotten to what she wants. The child has gotten to what she wants. By pulling hair, she could get to the toy. So that consequence can encourage the child to repeat that behavior again and again. And example 5, which is the last one, is about a child who cleans up the room. The consequence is that the child is taken to the park and a yummy ice cream. And the antecedent is that since his favorite toy is lost and his mom wanted the child to clean up the room so that the child finds his toy. The child cleaned up the room. Then mom took the child to the park and gave some yummy ice cream. But there is something very weird here. When you pay attention to this example, you see that the purpose of cleaning the room was to finding the favorite toy. But the consequence or reward from mom is taking to the park or giving ice cream. We still are not sure if that toy is found or not. But the consequence that the mom gave to the child is taking to the park and yummy ice cream. Yeah? So keep having all these examples in your mind because in the next slide we might need to refer to them. Okay? But just before we jump into the next slide, I want to stick your attention to a very, very important thing. Most of the time in life, some consequences would be the next antecedent of the next stuff. For example, a child behaves in a way, mom reacts to that with verbal warning. That verbal warning makes the atmosphere of the home a little tensed, and there is a kind of sulking happen between mom and child. That sulking atmosphere that two people in the family do not talk with each other because of being sulking with each other, it can be an antecedent for next behavior of the child, even though that sulking is a consequence of the past behavior, but it can make an antecedent for the next behavior as well. So maybe that lack of friendship or being sulking with each other made the child to decide to go to the stairwell and yell loudly and seek help from grandma. And then that behavior has the antecedent, like not being communicational to mom, but seeking help from another person, and it is another bad behavior. Then another consequence would happen. So one antecedent in the beginning, a behavior. Consequence, that consequence make another antecedent of some other behavior again and again and again. And it's kind of like a thing that it never stops and it's never ending. Yeah. So we go to the next slide and we want to briefly talk about antecedents and consequence from the perspective of natural and contractual. Natural versus contractual. So what do I mean by that slide is that just imagine that a child has not tidied up the room. And since the child didn't tidy up the room, it's very natural that the child loses his favorite toy. Because when you have a messy room, it's hard for you to find your favorite toy. Yeah? So that consequences of the toy which is lost is a natural consequence of that behavior. So in that scenario, the child decided to tidy up the room, and after tidying up the room, mom got happy and took the child to the park and gave ice cream. So, can you certify or guarantee that every time that you clean a room, you will be taken to park or you will be given ice cream? Goodness, no. For sure, no. Okay? Contractual consequences are the ones that are related to some supervision from others. Yeah? Someone should supervise to stay on the deal. For example, the mom says, if you yell loudly, I won't give you the iPhone, for example. I won't give you the iPad. So, at this example, mom is the person who is in charge of operating that contract. So there is a contract that, let's say so. Is it physically possible that the child has access to the iPad and is still yelling? Is it physically possible? For sure, it is physically possible. The child can yell and also pick an iPad from the table, off the table. Yeah. So we had to make a deal with the child that whenever you yell, you will be deprived of playing with iPad. So it's a contract. Another example about a kind of natural consequence. Just imagine that you run and you don't pay attention, and then your shoelace is untied, and then you fell on the floor. You fell on the floor because your shoelace was open. You untied. So it's the natural consequence of that negligence that you haven't fastened your shoelace correctly, so it happened. So even, for example, you cannot go outside the room until you open the door. If you don't open the door, physically you cannot get out of that room. So it's a kind of natural thing. But if a mom says that, if a teacher says that you cannot go out of the room until you seek for permission. So a child in the school setting is asked to raise hand and say, may I go out? And then the teacher would look at him and say, yes, you may. The teacher allows the child to go, but all of them are contractual, because physically, without seeking for permission, the child is able to go out, but it is against the contract. But there is no, so it's almost obvious about that. So in natural setting, you don't need that structure. In contractual, you need the structure. In natural setting, since that thing doesn't need any structural supervision, it's a general rule that is expected to happen every time. But in contractual setting, it's a little hard to make it generalizable to other settings. For example, a mom who has made a rule at home that when we are having lunch, all of us should sit at the table together, and even we have to pray before starting to eat. It's a kind of contract. But when the child goes to a PA day and is invited to another home, another peers, and then at that home, the rule of lunchtime is very different from the rule of lunchtime at his own home. So, for example, at that home, at the home of the peer, in the PA day, maybe the child can watch TV and then having food in front of TV. So when you set a rule that is not generalizable to other settings, they are contractual mostly. Also, natural consequences and antecedents have less confrontation with authority compared to the contractual thing that has maximum confrontation to authority. Because have you ever seen a person who is fighting the gravity rule that, oh, I fell down, you damn gravity? So no one is fighting with gravity. If you lose your balance, you will fall on the floor and you will never think of, oh, what a bad ground that made me fall. It's the gravity that exists every time. So you don't fight with that. And even you may seek for help from some authority to help you or support you. But in contractual rule, when a mom is forbidding access to TV or screen time to a child, that child feels that I could watch TV if my mom wasn't against me, if my mom didn't dictate that rule to me. So it's kind of maximum confrontation between authority and the child. I'm not saying that in real life it's possible that we always prepare all the consequences in a natural way, but sometimes we feel that controller people or controlling parents overuse, overuse and misuse their power to make lots of contractual policies and rules for children. And by doing so, they are maximizing the level of confrontation with the child. And since their rules are kind of not generalizable to other settings, they feel they are lonely in parenting. Does it make sense to you? Is kind of so it's the kind of topic that we can refer to it later on. So we can have kind of 1, 2, 3 action plan and a summary. And then In the next session, we will have a kind of another algorithm in which we can get back to this and then make it more prepared and more practical. But just imagine that there is a behavior. There is always a behavior that's happening. Always there is a behavior. And if that behavior is appropriate, so good for us. So let's celebrate. So if it is appropriate, acknowledge it, appreciate it, be happy, and enjoy. Also, try to record it somewhere so that it helps you in rainy days. Maybe you can say that, okay, so even though my child did these bad things, but I still can remember that sometimes he did bad things as well. And that appropriate behavior could be appreciated and acknowledged or recorded or kind of, yes, regarded. But if it is inappropriate, our journey stops. So if it is inappropriate, there is a very, very important question coming up right after. Can I target it? Can I target it? It's very important. Sometimes we face some inappropriate behavior that for many reasons we cannot target it. For example, just imagine that you are going to give a timeout to your child. You are going to have your child sit on the chair for 30 seconds. Why? Because that child spit it out. Spit it out and then was very, very violent and angry against one of the child who hadn't shared the toy with him. The kind of typical example. You are giving the timeout to the child for that. And the child is supposed to tolerate that 30-second timeout because of that behavior. So initially, you have targeted spitting out as a bad behavior. But in the middle of timeout, the child might hit the wall with hand or might want to tear a paper as well. For sure, both of them are inappropriate. But actually, it's better to stay on our same battle that we have chosen earlier, not to get distracted by other inappropriate behavior at the time that we are fixing another targeted behavior that we have targeted earlier. Another example of some lack of possibility of targeting a problem is that sometimes the behavior is inappropriate, but the child level of attention, cognition, IQ level, communicational capacity doesn't allow the child to have a better alternative, or the child has not been introduced any alternative yet, or the child doesn't have any idea about if it is inappropriate at all. So at those situations, we cannot target that. But why do we need to target it? Because once we target a behavior, we can start a plan on that. We can start an action plan on that. So if the response to that question is not now, so just record it and take a note of that. And then you can have plenty of time to discuss it along with kind of, let's say, specialist or practitioner or another experienced person, so that that person can help you zoom out and see something sometime outside the box, see if there are other solutions, why that behavior has happened, and then what are the current solutions for that. Okay, I'm not saying that you have to ignore or neglect it, but if you can't target it, okay, sometimes you just need to record it somewhere to get back to it later on. But if that behavior, which is inappropriate, you can target it at the moment. For example, it's the time to send a message to the child that this behavior is inappropriate. Let's take. Then, if it is so, you need to have two actions at the same time. First, you should have immediate response, specifically if needed, okay? And you also have to pay attention to the antecedents of that behavior. So, when we need immediate response are the times that the child is at risk of safety, the child behavior is ruining the self-image, the child behavior is challenging the power between the authorities, the parents or caregiver needs to keep consistency on some behavior modification approach, or another authority has made some contract, some agreed upon contract, and now you as another parent or another caregiver should be supportively join to that response, the same response, so that the child finds some unique kind of integrity between them, between the comments and also between the request or atmosphere. So there are lots of considerations also at this immediate response. There are control, power, calmness, consistency, and generalizability. That I will explain it later at the right timing, maybe the first time that I can get back to it. So for that part that is related to pay attention to the antecedent is very, very important. That paying attention to antecedent is that if we see some behavior is inappropriate, we should take a note and like a kind of inspector, well, as if you are supposed to run some investigation or inspection about that thing. So you jot down that behavior, that behavior happened, but when did it happen? Where did it happen? How often it happens? What is the intensity of that behavior? Can you describe that behavior in a way that if someone hasn't seen it firsthand, can completely imagine it? With who it happened? What was the order of the behavior? And at what time of the day that behavior happened, etc. There are other stuff that you can take a record of that as well. Once you pay attention to all details of the antecedent in the behavior, you might find kind of correlation or kind of commonalities of antecedent that whenever some specific things happen, the child is about to behave that way. For example, by experience, the family has realized that whenever we took our child to cinema, the child threw tantrum. So then we can ask together, what did you do right after the child threw tantrum? They say, for example, okay, we left cinema and say, okay, maybe the child is not ready yet. Or, no, we kept the child inside that dark cinema salon so that he gets used to that. There are different responses a family can do. But we can ask about what time of the day you regularly take the child to cinema. How often do you take him to cinema? From the 10 past time that you have taken you to child to that location, how many out of 10 it happened? How much is it intensified or intense during the time that you have taken your child to cinema? And is there any kind of trend, upward trend or downward trend, that is saying that the more you took your child to cinema, that tantrum got more exacerbated, or no, that tantrum get lower or less intensified? Or when you take the child to cinema, where do you sit? Next to the front row or back or next to the door? And what does the child do at the exact time of watching that movie? Is she eating popcorn, or has he been hungry? Many things that existed before. Sometimes, for example, family would say that that child is like a gentleman and we didn't have any issue with him, but he only is behaving nicely when either me or his dad is with him. If both of us at the same time are in the room, he start behaving very badly. So they have detected a very important antecedent in the behavior. And we should pay attention to the details of those antecedents that make that behavior possibility, the possibility of that the behavior issue raise up. So, uh, in general, that action plan can be a kind of practice that you can keep practicing these scenarios together whenever you see a behavior. You start to target it and investigate it and inspect it to see how you can address this. Next session, for sure, I will outline what time are going to be accompanied with a kind of reward or punishment or encouragement, or what is the difference between positive punishment or negative punishment, or positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement. There are plenty of things that we can work on and talk about with practical examples on that. But at the moment, the action plan that you have in your mind is about antecedent and behavior and consequence, A, B, C, and those examples. And last slide is about, let's go to that slide. Ooh, we talked about them. So here's the last slide. Some do and don'ts. As I said, just choose one battle at a time. Just choose one battle at a time. You need to find your own battle. Do not try to fix all misbehavior at the same time. Yeah, because once you are going to send a signal to the child that I'm not going to tolerate this behavior, maybe the child unconsciously distracts you by other misbehavior to see how about this, how about this, how about this. And once you share your energy over many stuff together, you cannot consistently watch that behavior or fix it. Respond to the behavior with maximum level of control on your emotion, which is a very important thing and needs lots of experience and lots of self self-understanding and self-perception. How you know yourself, and when you see a bad behavior, what emotional reactions happen, what emotions comes up in your brain, in your mind. Do you blame yourself? Do you feel guilty? Do you feel overly responsible for that behavior? Do you feel that you are going to be judged by other people when your child does so? Do you feel that there is some lack of or shortage that you are in, no, kind of you are kind of guilty of kind of ignorance or negligence? Uh, do you think that when a child behaves in a specific way, it means that you have to spend more time with him? anything that comes to your mind or anything that triggers your emotion, lessen your power, lessen your authority, and lessen your logical reaction to that. Most of the time, when you react to the child behavior in an emotional way, you will be regret of that, and then you have to fix it, and then the child behavior gets better, gets worse. So when you when you get angry with a child behavior and you yell loudly that don't do that again in a kind of angry and violent way, you say, I never liked that behavior, do not do it again. And you feel that, oh, the child got scared. You can just read in the child's eyes that the child got scared and didn't expect it to happen from you. Then you feel that, oh, I think that I exaggerated. I didn't want to ruin my friendship with my son, but actually I got angry all of a sudden. I was frustrated. I was frustrated, and I wish I wouldn't do that. But yes, my child behaved very badly, so someone should fix it somehow. You know, all these things come to your mind again, and then right after that intensified verbal warning that has come out from your emotional reaction, you feel regret, and in less than 10 minutes, you give some ice cream to the child and say, okay, that's okay, we will fix it together. So, those two different signals to the child that one of them you are overly reacting to some bad behavior, and on the other, you were paradoxically showing another reaction which is not related to that behavior, kind of sending paradoxical signals to the child and make the child more confused. Another thing is about once you have a clear mind, once you have clear data, and once you are free of attributions, you have higher chance of thinking logically and planning logically accordingly. What do I mean is that most of the time I face with parents with or even caregivers or even therapists that say that this child did so because he wanted to make me angry. This child deliberately did it to stand against me, and now it's my turn to set him back to the place. So I'm not going to give him any privilege now because he is threatening my authority. So those attributions, most of the time, are not going to work because the child's behavior has another purpose behind. No child behavior is ruining others' self-control. If a child decides to behave in a way, it's just to expand or maximize the level of control or joy of his own. Actually, that person, that child is not caring at all what feeling happened in you. That child only is in search of getting to what he or she feels by getting to have maximized have maximum level of mastery or control over an environment. That's all. So if a child discreetly goes and plugged in the PlayStation to play, and you feel that your child is doing this because he wanted to challenge your authority, it means that you have overly attributed that behavior. Actually, the child just wanted to play um, PlayStation without being committed to the contract he had had with you. Most of the time, even those contracts are written one-handed. No, the other person has not participated in that contract. So there are not many of them. Most of the time, they are not even a two-party involved in the contract. Measurable and graded consequence is another thing that I want to mention. So just imagine that a child behaves in a bad way and you decide to be sulking with him for 2 days. How come? In these 2 days, many good or bad things happens. Many good or bad other behavior happens. How do you provide a consequence that are not graded, gradual, or measurable? Most of the time, those unmeasurable and ungraded consequences are coming out of some emotional decision making that you just want to immediately fix the problem, and you believe that, like a button or like a switch control, that you can switch it off, switch it on, you can turn off the light, turn on the watch, turn on the TV. You can easily, by a single push of a button, you can fix the child behavior. But believe me, most of the time, the people who were looking for immediate fixing of something had ended to lots of violence to the child, because the immediate response are most of the time the ones that the child inhibit his behavior because of being scared. Uh, but if you frequently misuse and overly use that scaring the child or frightening the child and controlling the child for those behavior in the beginning, in short term, is answering, it's addressing, is fixing something as if they are kind of fixable thing, and all of a sudden you feel that, wow, there are kind of paradoxical behaviors emerging from a child in your presence and in your absence. Uh, Most of the time, forgiveness and being self-compassionate, forgiveness both to you and to your child, and always thinking of next time when you are implementing some um, responses to, some reaction to the child. Just forgiveness and thinking of next time is the key. Just imagine that all the child's lifespan is going to be considered as a kind of practice to become a more accountable adult in future. Um, by doing so, you feel that the journey of life is long enough that you have still time to work on these aspects without being overly worried about a single or a couple of times of mistakes. And behave in a way you can perform consistently. It means everywhere and every time. So just imagine that if you have gotten used to yelling loudly at your child whenever you want your child to listen up to you, just imagine yourself and the child in the mall or some superstore and see, do you dare to yell at your child in front of others in superstore or not? If you don't dare to, or if you don't find it appropriate behavior to yell at your child in the superstore, just believe me, once you do that behavior at home, the child realizes that, okay, so at home, my dad has maximum authority and can do so. And since I get frightened, I might follow him. But when we go to some superstore, I have noticed that my dad doesn't have that level of authority in the superstore in a kind of public situation. Then, okay, that places all the time for retaliation. All the time that I can be free because my father or my mother doesn't have that level of authority they used to have at home. So when they go to party, to a gathering, to grandma's home, to kind of superstore, to park, they explore more freedom, and then you feel I can't get to the same solution, get to the same responsible result by the previously successful solution. So everywhere and every time. It means that you should be you should choose some approaches or behavior that you can consistently use every time and everywhere. So there are all the slides, and now it's time for Q&A. It's almost on time. So just share your question with me, and thank you very much for paying attention to this slide, this presentation. Next session, we are going to mostly emphasize and focus on behavior modification based on these rules as a kind of algorithm, practical solutions, when to reward, when to punish, how to do so, and more expanded versions of do and don't later. Thank you.